The city never sleeps. They say that like it's a beautiful thing. But when you're lying on a thin mattress on the floor of a studio apartment you can barely afford, with the heating off because you can't pay the bill, the city that never sleeps just sounds like a never-ending reminder that you're awake and alone. It's 3:17 in the morning. The only light in the room comes from the half-open laptop on the floor. On the screen is an email. You've read it 17 times in the last hour. You know it by heart. Dear Alex, thank you for your time yesterday. Unfortunately, we have decided not to move forward with an investment at this time. We wish you the best of luck. At this time. That's the polite way of saying never. That's the professional way of saying you're not good enough. This was number 18. The 18th investor to say no. The 18th door slammed in your face. You can still feel the phantom handshake from the last one. The way he looked at you over his glasses. The slight smirk when you stumbled over your explanation of the user acquisition model. He didn't even let you finish the pitch. He just stood up, adjusted his expensive suit and said, "We'll be in touch." You're 24 years old. You're a college dropout from a town so small it doesn't even have a traffic light. You moved to the city with $3,000 in savings, a dream, and a prototype you built on a 5-year-old laptop in your childhood bedroom. And now, sitting in the dark, counting the receipts from the ramen packets under your bed to see if you can eat for the next week, you whisper a question to the empty room. Was this the biggest mistake of my life? This is the story of that mistake. This is the story of what happened after everyone said no. To understand the fall, you have to understand where he started. Alex didn't grow up in Silicon Valley. He didn't have a father who was an engineer or a mother who was a venture capitalist. He grew up in a place called Westbrook, a town with one main street, a diner, a hardware store, and a population that was slowly shrinking. His mother, Sarah, worked double shifts at that diner. She'd come home with aching feet and the smell of grease in her hair. But she always had a smile for Alex. His father left when he was 7, just packed a bag one Tuesday and never came back. After that, it was just the two of them. Money was a ghost in their house. It was always there, but never enough. Alex learned early on what it felt like to have the electricity shut off. He learned the specific dread of a letter with a red stamp on it. He learned to pretend he wasn't hungry at lunch so he could save the food for dinner. But his mother, she had this fierce, quiet hope. She'd come home late, sit on the edge of his bed, and tell him, "You're going to be something, Alex. You're going to do something big. You have a fire in you that your father never had." And Alex believed her. Not because he felt special, but because he had to. Her belief was the only fuel he had. He was a smart kid, but not in the way the system rewards. He wasn't great at memorizing dates for history class, but he was obsessed with how things worked. He'd find broken electronics at the curb on garbage day, take them home and spend hours taking them apart, laying the pieces out on his bedroom floor like a detective at a crime scene. He got his first computer when he was 13. A clunky, second-hand desktop a neighbor was throwing away. It was his window to another world. A world where kids his age were building things, creating things. He taught himself to code in the middle of the night, the glow of the monitor his only light, the quiet hum of the machine his only company. While other kids were at football practice or parties, Alex was on online forums, asking questions, failing, trying again, failing better. He wasn't a genius. He was just desperately, quietly hungry. Not for food anymore, but for a different life. A life where his mother didn't have to work until her feet bled. So when he got a scholarship to a state university for computer science, it felt like destiny. It felt like the first step out. It felt like the fire his mother always talked about was finally going to catch. He was wrong. College was a different kind of struggle. It wasn't just the classes, it was the people. They spoke a different language. They talked about summer internships at their father's firm, about ski trips, about trust funds. Alex worked in the campus library 40 hours a week just to afford his ramen and rent for a room he shared with 3 other guys. He felt like an alien. He was smart, but he was playing catch-up. He'd stay up all night to understand a concept that seemed to come naturally to the kids from good high schools with good computers. The idea came to him in his sophomore year. It was a simple concept, a platform to help local small businesses manage their online presence and delivery. He saw his mother's diner struggling. They didn't have a website. They weren't on any delivery apps. They were losing business to the chains. He thought, what if there was one simple tool that could fix all of that? Something affordable, easy to use, built for people like his mom. He started building it at night. He'd finish his library shift at 11 p.m., then code until 4 a.m., then grab a few hours of sleep before his 8 a.m. class. The obsession took over. He stopped going to lectures. He stopped caring about grades. All that mattered was the code. All that mattered was solving this problem. He was building something real, something that could actually help people. That felt more important than any textbook. His grades plummeted. He got the letter first, academic probation, then a meeting with his advisor, a stern, gray-faced man who looked at Alex like he was a failure. "Mr. Harrison," he said, sliding a piece of paper across the desk, "your scholarship is contingent on maintaining a certain GPA. You are far below that threshold." Alex stared at the paper. It wasn't just a piece of paper. It was the door slamming shut on the only path he knew. "I have a project," Alex said, his voice cracking. "I'm building a company. It has real potential." The advisor sighed. He'd heard it 100 times before. "A lot of students have projects, Alex. A degree is what gets you a job. It's what builds a future. You're throwing that away for a website." It wasn't a website. It was his mom's tired feet. It was the eviction notices. It was the only way out. He didn't go back to class the next day, or the day after that. He called his mother on a Thursday night. He could hear the clatter of dishes in the background. "Mom," he said, his throat tight, I dropped out." There was a long, terrible silence on the other end of the line. It was worse than any rejection he would ever face. It was the sound of her hope breaking. "Dropped out?" Her voice was small, tired. "Alex, that scholarship, that was everything. That was our ticket." "I know, Mom, I know. But I have this idea. I can do this. I can build something. For us." The silence stretched on. He could picture her, leaning against the wall in the diner's kitchen, wiping sweat from her forehead. "I'm too tired for this, Alex," she finally said, her voice full of a weariness he had never heard before. "I'm too tired to argue. I hope you know what you're doing." She hung up. He sat on the floor of his cramped room, the phone pressed to his ear, listening to the dial tone. That was the first rejection, and it hurt more than all the others combined. He moved to the city 6 months later. He had the prototype, a half-finished version of his platform. He had a few hundred business cards he'd printed at the library. He had $3,000, saved penny by penny from a construction job he'd taken after dropping out. The city was a monster. It was loud and fast and expensive. His studio apartment was a box, a 200-square-foot box with a hot plate and a refrigerator that hummed like a dying animal. But it had a window, and from that window he could see the skyscrapers where the investors lived, the people with the money, the people who could say yes. He worked days at a coffee shop to pay the rent. He'd wake up at 5 a.m., grind beans and steam milk for people who wouldn't even look him in the eye. He'd come home smelling of espresso, change into his one good shirt, the blue one he'd bought at a thrift store, and spend his evenings and nights coding, refining the prototype, and cold emailing investors. He went to every networking event he could afford. He'd stand in the corner of a crowded bar, nursing a single soda water, watching the sharks circle. He'd see founders his age, laughing easily, wearing expensive casual clothes, surrounded by people who wanted to know them. They had confidence that came from a lifetime of being told they were special. He'd walk up to someone, try to introduce himself, and get a polite, dismissive glance. His shoes were cheap. His shirt was wrinkled. He didn't have the right stories. His first real pitch was to a mid-level venture capital firm. He was so nervous he felt sick. He practiced his presentation 100 times in his apartment, pacing the 3 steps from the window to the door. He walked into their glass and steel office. It was so clean it felt sterile. He shook hands with 3 partners, their grips firm and cold. He started his pitch. He talked about his mom, about the diner, about the millions of small businesses being left behind. He saw one of them look at his watch. Another one was typing on his phone under the table. He stumbled. He forgot a key statistic. His mouth went dry. When he finished, there was a beat of silence. Then the lead partner, a woman with a sharp bob and sharper eyes, leaned forward. "This is very quaint, Alex. The personal story is nice, but your total addressable market is too fragmented. Your user acquisition cost is too high. We don't see a path to $1 billion exit. It's a nice lifestyle business maybe, but it's not for us." Lifestyle business. That's what they called the thing he was pouring his soul into. A hobby. A nice little project. The walk back to his apartment was the longest of his life. He replayed every word, every glance at a watch, every silent phone tap. The city didn't feel like a place of opportunity anymore. It felt like a machine designed to crush people like him. That was number 1. He told himself it was just a learning experience. He'd get the next one. Then came number 2, and 3, and 4. Each rejection chipped away at him. After a while, they started to blur together. The same glass offices, the same cold handshakes, the same polite, brutal words. "We like the team, but we're passing for now. The space is too crowded. You're a little too early for us. Come back when you have traction." Traction. That was the word they loved. Traction meant users. Traction meant revenue. But you needed money to get users. You needed money to market the product. It was a snake eating its own tail. He started to believe them. Maybe it was too crowded. Maybe he was too early. Maybe he just wasn't good enough. He'd call his mom every Sunday. The calls became shorter. He could hear the unspoken question in her pauses. "When are you coming home? When will you give this up?" He didn't have an answer. The 18th pitch was different. This investor, a man named David Sterling, was a legend. He'd funded some of the biggest names in tech. He was known for taking risks on young, hungry founders. Alex had sent him a cold email, a desperate Hail Mary, and somehow, someone on his team had responded. He prepped for 2 weeks. He barely slept. He rewrote his pitch deck 10 times. He memorized every number, every possible question. He bought a new shirt. It was still cheap, but it was new. The office was in a tower that touched the clouds. The elevator ride felt like an ascent into heaven. He was shown into a corner office with a panoramic view of the city. The city looked small from up there. It looked manageable. David Sterling was older than he expected, with a calm, friendly face. He shook Alex's hand warmly. For a moment, Alex allowed himself to hope. He started the pitch. It was his best one yet. He was confident. He was clear. He told the story of his mom, of Westbrook, of the fire that drove him. He showed the prototype. He explained the vision. Sterling listened. He didn't look at his watch. He didn't type on his phone. He just watched Alex, nodding occasionally. When Alex finished, there was a long pause. Sterling leaned back in his chair, looking out the window for a moment. "Alex," he said, his voice soft, "that was a beautiful pitch. Your passion is real. I can feel it." Alex's heart soared. "But," Sterling continued, and the word hung in the air like a blade, "passion isn't enough. Your product is decent. Your story is compelling. But you? You're not ready." Alex blinked. "I'm sorry? You're a solo founder. That's a red flag. You have no experience. You have no network. You have no track record. You built this in your bedroom. That's admirable, but it's not a company. The truth is, I'm not investing in your idea. I'm investing in you. And right now, you're not an investment. You're a risk." The words hit him like physical blows. You're a risk. You're not enough. Not your idea, not your product, not your story. You. Sterling stood up. He gave Alex a sympathetic smile. My advice? Go get a job at a startup. Learn how things are really done. Build a network. Then in 5 years, maybe you try again. Good luck. He extended his hand. Alex shook it mechanically. The handshake was firm, but it felt like a dismissal. He walked out of the office in a daze. He rode the elevator back down to earth, back to the streets where he belonged. He walked for hours, not knowing where he was going. He ended up on a bench in a small park, watching people go about their normal lives. People with jobs, people with purpose, people who weren't risks. The sun went down, the city lit up. He finally made it back to his apartment. He sat on the floor, his back against the wall. He opened his laptop. The email was already there. Dear Alex, thank you for your time yesterday. Number 18. And that's when the voice inside his head, the one he'd been fighting for 2 years, finally got loud enough to hear. He's right. You're a college dropout from nowhere. You have no money, no team, no clue. You're not a founder. You're just a kid with a dream and a death wish. Your mother is working double shifts because of you. You're wasting your life. You're wasting her hope. It's over. It's been over. Just stop. He sat there in the dark, the words echoing in his head for what felt like hours. He didn't cry. He was too empty for tears. He just felt a heavy, crushing numbness. He didn't leave the apartment for 2 days. He didn't answer his phone. He just lay on the mattress, staring at the ceiling, letting the city's never-ending noise wash over him. He thought about giving up. He thought about going home. He thought about getting a real job, a normal life, and forgetting this whole stupid dream ever existed. On the 3rd day, there was a knock on the door. He ignored it. The knock came again, harder. Alex? Alex, I know you're in there. Open the door. It was his friend Sam. Sam was a designer he'd met at a networking event months ago. One of the few people in the city who didn't treat him like he was invisible. They'd grab cheap coffee sometimes and talk about their dreams. Alex dragged himself to the door and opened it. Sam took one look at him, the dark circles, the 3-day stubble, the hollow eyes, and walked right in. Okay, Sam said, looking around the tiny, depressing room. This is a disaster. You look like a disaster. What happened? Alex just pointed to the laptop. Sam sat down, read the email. He was quiet for a long time. I got the 17th one last week, Alex finally whispered, his voice hoarse from not being used. This is 18. He told me I'm not an investment, I'm a risk. He told me to go get a job. Maybe he's right, Sam. Maybe I'm just not built for this. Sam closed the laptop. He looked at Alex with a mix of pity and something else. Anger, maybe. He's an idiot, Sam said flatly. No, he's a billionaire. He knows what he's talking about. He knows how to make money, Sam shot back. He doesn't know you. He doesn't know your story. He looks at spreadsheets and market sizes. He doesn't look at fire. Alex, you built a working prototype by yourself. You taught yourself to code in a town with nothing. You've survived 2 years in this city on ramen and hope. You've knocked on 18 doors. 18. Most people would have quit after 2. I have no money, Alex said, his voice breaking. I have no team. I have no proof. You have a product, Sam said. You have a vision. And you have me. Alex looked up, confused. What? I'm a decent designer, Sam said with a small smile. And I'm sick of working on other people's stupid apps for other people's stupid startups. I want to build something that matters. Your idea matters. It's for people like my mom, too. So here's the deal. You stop feeling sorry for yourself. You get up, you shower, and we figure this out. Together. It wasn't a grand cinematic moment. There was no inspirational music. There was just a friend, sitting on the floor of a cold apartment, offering to share the weight. Something shifted in Alex. A tiny spark, buried under the ash of 18 rejections, flickered back to life. He wasn't alone. They started working the next day. They had no money, so they worked for free. Sam would come over after his freelance gigs, and they'd work on the product until 2 or 3 in the morning. They redesigned the interface, making it beautiful and simple. They fixed the bugs. They made it better. They stopped pitching to investors. Alex realized Sterling had been right about one thing. He wasn't ready. He needed traction. He needed proof. So they went to the source. They went to the small businesses. Alex would walk into local coffee shops, laundromats, bakeries, and offer them the platform for free for 3 months. Just try it. The first few said no. They were busy. They were skeptical. They didn't trust some kid with a laptop. But then, a small bookstore owner named Maria said yes. She was an older woman, tired of trying to figure out social media and online orders. Alex and Sam spent an afternoon setting everything up for her, showing her how it worked. A week later, she got her first online order. She called Alex, her voice bright with surprise. "It worked! Someone bought a book!" That was the first win. It was tiny. It was insignificant to the world. But to Alex, it was everything. It was proof. They kept going. They signed up a food truck, a barbershop, a yoga studio. Slowly, painstakingly, they built a list of users. 30 businesses, then 50, then 100. They worked insane hours. Alex still worked at the coffee shop. Sam still did his freelance work. They poured every spare cent into server costs and coffee. They had no social life. They ate peanut butter sandwiches more often than not. Alex's mother still called with that worried tone in her voice. But for the first time, he had an answer for her. "I'm making progress, Mom," he'd tell her. "Slowly, but it's happening." He was sleeping 4 hours a night, but it was a different kind of tired. It wasn't the heavy, soul-crushing exhaustion of failure. It was the good tired. The tired that comes from building something with your own hands. One night, at 3 a.m., after fixing a critical bug that could have crashed the whole system, Alex leaned back in his chair. Sam was asleep on the floor, using a jacket as a pillow. The apartment was a mess, littered with coffee cups and energy drink cans. Alex looked at the laptop screen. The dashboard showed the user numbers ticking over. 112 active businesses. He thought about Maria's bookstore. He thought about the food truck guy who high-fived him when he got his first order. He thought about Sam, sleeping on his dirty floor because he believed. He didn't feel like a failure anymore. He didn't feel like a risk. He felt like a founder. They kept their heads down for another 6 months. They grew to 500 users. They built a simple payment system and started charging a small monthly fee. It wasn't much, but it was revenue. Real revenue. It was enough to let Alex quit the coffee shop. They still weren't thinking about investors. They were just focused on the work, on the users, on making the product better every single day. Then one Tuesday afternoon, Alex got an email. The subject line made his stomach drop. "Meeting request, David Sterling." He stared at it for a full minute, thinking it was a joke, a glitch, a trick of his exhausted mind. He opened it. "Alex, I heard about what you and your team are building. 500 plus paying customers in under a year is impressive. Bootstrap too. I'd love to see a demo. Are you free next week? David." Sam was jumping up and down. Alex just felt numb. A year ago, this man had told him he wasn't enough. Now he was asking for a meeting. They prepped, but it was different this time. They weren't preparing a pitch to convince someone of a dream. They were preparing a report on a reality. They had numbers. They had testimonials. They had a team. They went back to the tower that touched the clouds. The elevator ride felt different. Alex wasn't nervous. He was calm. Sterling met them at the door of his office. He shook Alex's hand, then Sam's. He seemed genuinely interested. Alex didn't give a rehearsed pitch, he just talked. He talked about Maria's bookstore. He talked about the food truck. He talked about the late nights and the bugs and the wins. He opened his laptop and showed him the dashboard. 532 paying customers, 98% retention rate, month-over-month growth of 15%. Sterling listened, asked sharp, intelligent questions. Alex and Sam answered them easily. They knew their business inside and out. When they were done, Sterling leaned back in his chair, the same chair he'd been in a year ago. He looked at Alex for a long moment. Then he smiled. "A year ago," Sterling said, "I told you that you weren't an investment. I told you that you were a risk. I was right." Alex's heart clenched. Not again. "But I was looking at the wrong thing," Sterling continued. "I was looking at a kid with an idea. Today, I'm looking at a founder with a business. You didn't come back to me with a better pitch. You came back with a better reality. You built something. You proved the model. You did the hard part. You made yourself unrisk." He paused. "So let's talk about how we can help you take this to the next level. I want to invest." The words hung in the air. Alex looked at Sam. Sam looked at him. They didn't jump up and down. They didn't cheer. They just sat there, in that glass office above the city, and let the moment sink in. It wasn't the validation Alex had dreamed of. It wasn't the triumphant victory. It was just the next step, an earned step. They took the money. They built the company. They grew to thousands, then tens of thousands of users. They moved into a real office. They hired a team. Alex's mom finally quit the diner. She came to visit the office, and he saw her eyes well up as she looked at the hustle and bustle of the place that had started in her son's childhood bedroom. Years later, Alex would sometimes walk through the office late at night, when everyone had gone home. He'd look at the young faces in the photos on the walls, the team he'd built. He'd think about that cold apartment. He'd think about the 18th no. He'd think about Sam, asleep on his floor. And he'd realize that the most important moment wasn't the day he got the check from Sterling. It wasn't the day they hit 1 million users. The most important moment was the night of the 18th no, lying on that mattress in the dark, hearing that voice tell him he was a failure, and choosing, the next morning, to get up anyway. The rejection was the fuel. The doubt was the fire. And the only way out was through. So if you're listening to this, and you feel like Alex, if you're lying in your own dark room counting your own failures, hearing your own voice telling you you're not enough, hear this. The world is full of people who will tell you no. They will tell you you're a risk. They will tell you you're too early, too late, too inexperienced, too small. They will judge you by what you lack, not by what you have. They don't see the fire. They don't see the hours you put in when no one is watching. They don't see the vision that keeps you up at night. They don't see your mother's tired feet, but you see them. And that has to be enough. Because the 18th no is not the end of the story. It's just the end of the beginning. It's the moment where you decide if you're building a dream or just a castle made of sand. The path isn't a straight line. It's a dark room. You stumble, you fall, you feel the walls for a door. And sometimes, just when you think there is no door, you find that you were the one who had to build it. You are not a risk. You are not a failure. You are a work in progress. And your story isn't over.